Good morning, everybody. Deacon Tim Wyman here, and it's 10 o'clock on Thursday, and so that means it's the Parish Coffee Hour with Father Paul and friends. And so I want to welcome everybody today. It's a beautiful day outside, and we're just glad you're here. So I want to get started and turn it right over to Father Paul. So take it away, Father Paul.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you today. It's of course a somber time in our world. As even as we begin this program at 10 o'clock, I hear our church bells ringing, and as a reminder to pray for all those who are victims of COVID. We're certainly living in a challenging time, and it's a challenging week as it's emerging. This upcoming Wednesday will be the inauguration of our new president, and we're all very much concerned about how all that will go. Meanwhile, we know that every year on this time, on the Monday that's in the middle of the month of January, we celebrate Martin Luther King Day. We want to meet today and talk a bit about Dr. Martin Luther King and his insights, the way he's helped our nation to change, but also some of the issues that are still out there that still need to be worked on. So, with us today is Dr. Roger Cleveland, and very glad you're with us today. And I'm going to start us with a reflection from my wall, no less. It's a quote that I have on a plaque, and the quote goes, "We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force," by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, glad you're with us today, Dr. Cleveland. And just as we get started, it probably would be good for you to introduce yourself. I know you're a university professor and area of education, but also in the area of working for more justice from a racial standpoint. Could you speak a little bit about your position and where you're working at these days, and just a general introduction? Again, welcome. Glad you're with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, and I appreciate you all spending some time to talk about Dr. King and the issues that are important in the past and in the current and present time. As Father Prego said, my name is Roger Cleveland, and I'm currently a professor in the College of Education at Eastern Kentucky University, and also the director of diversity and faculty development. And what that means, I do a lot of training with faculty and recruitment for faculty also at the university. Prior to that, I was a professor at Kentucky State University, and I've taught at Morehead State and Middle Tennessee and adjunct at University of Kentucky. And do a lot of work and trainings for school districts, actually mostly out of state more than in state, but some in Kentucky. So I've been doing that for about 15 years or so, and some community work also.
Well, I'm very appreciative as one pastor in this community for the work that you did in Lexington Catholic in a critical situation they had in the last few years. And our goal today isn't to analyze that or anything, but it's not uncommon knowledge, and just it's so important to help people to communicate and to grow in respect for one another. So thank you for that kind of work that you've been doing all around the country and that you've done here locally. Just to the issue, how do you think it's going to be this year? How do you think Martin Luther King Day will be observed this year? Strikingly 2 days before the inauguration, and in the midst of this milieu where all's going on with the Capitol in D.C., but also concern about capitals all through the country.
I think in general, it'll be celebrations and honoring Dr. King. It'll be a little different because of the pandemic, that's for sure. You're not gonna have crowds of people together and things like that and celebrating, having programs. Lexington has one of the largest celebrations of Dr. King at the downtown through Alpha Phi Alpha, one of the largest King celebration breakfasts in the country. And we know that's going to be virtual. So we have a lot of virtual programs and things like that in the community and universities and places like that. I think that there will be a time for some pause to really talk about what he was about. And I think we can use that as some fuel and opportunity to think about what's going on currently in our United States. And so I don't think it'd be drastically different other than the fact that people won't be together. You know, my concerns and thoughts always during the King celebration on that third Monday is that we go all out, you know, the week before and the day of his holiday, and then go back to business as usual on that Tuesday. And so I find that problematic. But, you know, his thing was about a call to action. And so we don't just do action that week or that day of his holiday. It's throughout the year. And I think if we thought about that, internalized some of his words, that we possibly would not be in a situation that we're in right now.
Yeah. I recall, and I'm in my mid 70s, so I grew up in the greater Cincinnati area. So, you know, I recall some of the, I guess some of the segregationist policies that were part of life then. And can you speak a little bit about that, the extent of how much there was, but how much there needed to be yet in terms of civil rights for African Americans, say in the 50s and early 60s?
Well, you know, in the 50s, Dr. King and other civil rights activists were primarily focused on segregation, as you mentioned, and that was de jure segregation. It was law that things are segregated, whether it was schools and theaters and places like that. So a lot of the focus in the 50s and moving into the 60s was mostly on segregation. And if you move it to now, we're still pretty segregated if you think about it in a lot of places, in a lot of cities, but it's a de facto segregation. It's not by law, but it's by choice to some degree. And then also how housing patterns take place. And back in the day, we had redlining and blockbusting and things of that nature. How you would see highways go through cities. As you said, you live in the Cincinnati area, and I was born in Cincinnati. I lived there for a while. I was moved back there, and you'll see highways that kind of split the city up, really, in a number of places, like 75 does in Cincinnati, and you'll see there's a location in the area near downtown Cincinnati that's always been pretty much African American until recently in the years of gentrification, where they've closed down those housing projects, and people moved back into the city. So during the 50s and 60s, it was more about trying to change the law of desegregation. And now it's really about looking at policies and things of that nature, so people can kind of really freely live where they want to live. But we still have de facto segregation in the United States, not as much as we had in the past, but it's still there. You can look at schooling patterns and things of that nature. But the primary focus was really in the 50s and 60s to address the legislation and laws that we had that ensured segregation.
Yeah, it's kind of striking, the world of sports, how things have changed. Where there's, it's not an aberration that there's a African American coach, or the teams are, much more, full of players who have African American backgrounds rather than, a white team that might have one or two, people of color playing for them. That's certainly striking. Yeah. Things are changing, but they got a way to go yet. How do you think Dr. King would be responding to the current race relations situation in the U.S.?
Oh, I think he'd be terribly disappointed about where we are as it relates to, I think people made the assumption because, as you said, there's a lot of diversity in athletics and professional sports and things of that nature. You had your first, African-American president in 2008. And as soon as that happened, people talked about the post-racial America. And one person or one event doesn't change the culture and the environment in society as it relates to race or class or those kinds of things. And so I think it'd be, pretty disappointed, of the double standards. And, in my class, if you take any of my classes, you have to read a letter from a Birmingham jail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if you read that or not, but in the book, he was arrested in Birmingham, and he was reading the paper where 8 clergy in the city of Birmingham was basically criticizing him as an outside agitator and why he came to Birmingham during the and with the protests and things of that nature. And in the letter from Birmingham jail, he basically takes these 8 clergy to task about their silence during the social injustices happening in their city. And so I recommend everyone to read Letter from Birmingham Jail because it's tied directly to what's going on now. And so it's, it's interesting times. We know that there's double standards as it relates to people of color if they do something versus white. So he would see that hypocrisy to some degree. It still amazes me that what happened last Wednesday, that people, stormed the federal Capitol. And you didn't hear a lot of people speaking out against that, necessarily locally. Some people did, but not a lot. But then 4 or 5 days later, 15 young men kneel on the national anthem, and people's outraged, but not outraged that, and basically that's freedom of speech, right? But attacking the Capitol is a whole nother thing, but you saw the double standard and those kinds of things. So I think he would see there's been progress. There's no question about that. He would see that there is progress. He would see that some people are speaking up against injustices and inequities and things of that nature. But overall, probably over the past, since last spring through the summer and now, you could tell it was 1955, 1960, or 2020, the way some things were going on during the protest, all the way from late spring all the way to now. So in some instances, he would say there's some progress, but in some instances, he would probably be disappointed. And you think about how things are going. And to this day, like I said, the letter from Birmingham jail is really written to clergy. And there's still a lot of silence about over the summer and African-American men being shot and things like that. And a lot of people didn't speak out, but a lot of people did also. But, I always say silence is consent, right? And so he would, I think he would have mixed emotions to some degree. There's a lot of progress, but then again, we're still saying in 2021, the first this or the first that. That's interesting that we're still having this person is the first African American or this person is the first woman. We're still saying those things in 2021. We're still saying those things.
Yeah. It's not like we're like there's a commonality, exclusive of the color of skin. It's really still that separation of the black athlete, the white athlete, just for instance, or the politician who's different than the norm, that kind of stuff. As we reflect on Dr. King, it strikes me just how exceptional he was. He grew up in a family where I think his father and grandfather were both ministers, and evidently he was brilliant. Even in high school, he went to 2 years of high school rather than 4 years. He skipped 2 years of high school. He was ordained at 18 and got a PhD at Boston U at 26. And and he was settling in the Boston area, I think, with his wife, but then he did move to, I think, to Montgomery, and he got involved in the bus boycott, I think, that was sparked by Rosa Parks. Can you speak a little bit about that in the mid 50s?
Yes, thinking about that, it's also about, it's all about timing also. It's about timing, and this is very strategic also. So during the bus boycott, you think about what's going to be the most impactful way to get people's attention, as it relates to segregation, who's the best person to lead that. And, I always say that a lot of times Dr. King, from my perspective, may not have been the best strategist necessarily, because there's other people behind, the movement.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great strategist, but he may not have been the only one. But I think he was seen as someone as being a Baptist preacher, a great orator. As in 2021, we would say he was the one that could sell the why we need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had the charisma of the leadership. He was probably perceived as less dangerous than other people. And you'll see there's a book called The Parallels of a Black Man, where they talk about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And in the 60s, after Malcolm X went to Mecca and saw that all walks of life were Muslims, he came back to the United States with a little more softer perspective, where Dr. King was moving to more and more agitation about injustices. But before that, I think he was seen as someone that was palatable, but he would hold people accountable in a way that they would listen. And so it was very strategic about him. That was not the only reason, but because he had the skills and the mindset and intellect to do it also. But it was also important they had someone that people would listen to. And I think that's a couple of reasons why he was selected as the leader, at least out front. But like I said, there was other people leading, Adam Clayton Powell and a number of other people, Ralph Abernathy, were behind the scenes, strategizing also. But I think during the Montgomery boycott, I think it was seen that he had all the skills that he would get everyone's ear. And so I think that was one of the reasons why he was kind of selected as the person out front.
When did the Southern Christian Leadership Conference develop? Was that going for a while before the boycott began, or was that sparked by that? Or
I think that was right around the same time. They used that organization to plan and strategize and things of that nature. And, Dr. King had a role in that. Once again, there's a lot of other people involved in it. And it's really important to stress that he was on the forefront and out there as the messenger, but a lot of people and CLC was part of that. But that organization, Father it was used to strategize, get resources, get out in the community and galvanize people and things of that nature. And he was part of that also. But so it's kind of going around the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And but the leaders really were saying, Martin Luther King, you're the man. We need you to do this. And
he was kind of put out there. It was not like that. He was just like, I'm going to do this. It was a lot of encouragement by other people, and to pick the right person to be able to lead this protest.
How did he grow in his understanding of and commitment to and teaching of nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience?
I think a lot of his reading was through and thoughts and stuff came through Gandhi, and also that the fact that he was a clergy, and so I think his beliefs, his tenets and beliefs through his word and the Bible and that and Gandhi moved him towards that direction of nonviolence. But contrary to popular belief, he was all about nonviolence, but he also understood that it was important to push people and hold them accountable. He wasn't, because when you celebrate, all you hear is, I have a dream speech, but he's had, hundreds of other speeches that were more challenging, in your face, holding people accountable. But it's interesting that when we celebrate his holiday, that's usually the speech that we only hear. You rarely hear anything about letter from Birmingham jail, because he's really holding white clergy accountable. And if you read that document, he still preaches nonviolence, but he's on a whole nother level about accountability. Mm-hmm. And he talks about silence and privilege, and they basically said this is not the right time. And he says, when is a good time? When is a good time? So he was but he got a lot of his teachings and things like that, not only from Gandhi, but a lot of those. And I think the fact that he was a pastor, it only made sense to some degree that he would preach nonviolence.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Now, in Lexington, there's the organization Build, and that brings together members of a lot of congregations, and really, it is a unique blend of churches that are, I guess, traditionally white churches, traditionally African American churches, and we're working together, with regard to issues like the violence and the fatal shootings in town, and some of the disparities in terms of school children when they're misbehaving, whether they're white or black, and how they're treated. But a fundamental document for us is the letter from the Birmingham jail that really helps us to think of what it's about to be leaders and helping to work for justice.
Are those conversations when you all go through that document? Those pretty rich conversations?
They are. Well, more than conversations. They become. We do research, and then there's recommendations made to the powers that be in the city. And so that it's certainly an opportunity to hold people accountable and to and climaxes with a very large scale meeting at usually at the Heritage Center and Heritage Hall, and representatives of the mayor and police department, if not the chief and the mayor themselves, are there, and usually they are, and health department as we talk through critical issues in terms of helping our city to be a better city for everybody. I know Deacon Tim's been even more involved in this than I have, and even though he's our techie, he can chime in too. And by the way, I think a couple of go ahead, Tim, if you want to jump in.
No, I think you portrayed the Build mission well. I think it's just to bring people together and say, what can we do across all areas to make our city a more just place for everyone, and everybody's included. The makeup, I think we have 26 or 27 congregations right now, and like you say, it runs the gamut across big, small, different ethnicities, different financial profiles. It's all over. It's a good diverse blend of congregations. So we're just trying to work to make our city a more just place to live and raise our families in. So
yeah. Now, Tim, have a couple questions come in?
Yeah, I just have one, actually a couple. Well, it's a comment, and it says, do you think Sunday morning is still the most segregated hour in our country? And maybe I would say in Lexington. And if so, what can we do to change that? So that was let's wrestle with it. Let's chew on that one for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot to chew on, isn't it? And I think you all have more experience in that. As I'm not a clergy, but you all have. It's interesting that question came out because I'm familiar with Build, and I'm very familiar with the work the organization does and bringing different congregations together. And you would think Deacon Tim said there's like 26 congregations, or the leaders of those congregations come together. And so I wonder if there's is there conversations about that? You know, I attend First Baptist Church Bracktown, and Reverend Agins will always say, we don't have a black church. Our church is red brick, and so in other words, everybody's welcome. Yeah. And it's still predominantly African American, but we still have some diversity in that church. And so I think a lot of times that people, regardless where you attend church, you bring who you are in that church, right? And so you don't get to put however you feel about other groups of people in the parking lot, go to church for 2 hours, and then come back and go be that person again. You are who you are. And so a lot of times it's really about creating an environment where people feel welcome. And you would think of all places, a church would be one where it be welcoming and inviting, and you can be who you are. And I think that's the feel. And then our part is perception, that the perception is that if I go to attend a predominantly white church, I'm not going to be welcome. And that's a perception or assumption. You don't know that until you go in there, because all the congregations are different. And this is the same thing if you go to predominantly, Bracktown or Consolidated or First African, the name First African right there will have people's perceptions like, I'm not going there, but part of that's perception. But I would love to hear you all's thoughts about that, because it's still pretty segregated on Sundays. Not as much as it used to be, but it still is.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Father Paul. You go first.
Well, I think it's a self-chosen thing. Now, one of the things, at least from a very subjective standpoint, we've been blessed with priests on our staff who are African, and we've got a variety of ethnicities represented, with plenty of people who are active in the parish who are brown and dark colors, from India and from various countries in Africa, in addition to African Americans. So there's I think some of that. Again, a lot of times it's our churches are neighborhood churches, and so again, the way it shapes up in terms of suburbia, it is already, I think, to a great extent, still somewhat segregated. I'm struck in our city, St. Peter Claver Church is, I think, regarded as an attractive place for people of any color, just because of the spirit of the liturgy and the spirit of the parish, and that's all to the good. Every congregation has its strength, and I think that's beautiful. Just as a couple of our parishes are very, very strong in terms of being Anglo and Hispanic at the same time, and that's beautiful too. And again, people are traveling a little bit more than just walking from their neighborhood to these churches, and those are good things. So we're moving a bit within the Catholic Church, but we still got a way to go. I would say that when I was growing up, it was an issue if somebody, say, of German European heritage would be marrying somebody of say, Irish European heritage. That's over now, and I think we'll see the day when it really doesn't matter what ancestry a person has, or what race they come from, or what color they are, and that we don't even talk about interracial marriages anymore. It's just people. So we got a way to go, but and again, if we would say that Sunday morning is a segregated time, I know when I preach, I don't preach from the background of the experience of an African American person. I speak from the background of an Anglo-American person or European American person, which is different. And and the ideal would be that there would be much more of a blending. So those are some starting points, I guess, terms of saying, here's where we are and we got a way to go.
Yeah. Deacon Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's in some ways we've been a victim of things that existed, let's say 2 or 3, 4 decades ago, out of necessity. So St. Peter Claver, right? You look at the historical here in Lexington, historically African American parish. I think over the last 10, 15 years for sure, more and more people have been blending. But I think it took a while to get away from sort of that characterization. Somebody comes to a parish, well, have you checked out St. Peter Claver? Because that's where but I think we're making progress there. I think people are making much more of a people in the Catholic Church tend to do this anyway. They call it parish shop or whatever. So people are checking out different parishes, worship styles, music, but I think it's less and less every year. It's a little bit less and less about a racial question and more about, am I comfortable in this church regardless of who's here? And I think we got a ways to go. But I think we are making progress.
I don't think that's unique to the Catholic Church. People church shop all the time. Mm-hmm. I remember we in 2006, I think, Bracktown, we built a new church. Seats 950 people, and the place is like packed. The first 4 or 5 months because everybody wanted to see the new church. Reverend Hagen's been preaching there for years. It's not like he's changed all of a sudden. And then maybe 8-9 months later, probably 300 of those 900 were gone, different places. And they went to all these churches. And so, people do that shop all the time. But I'm very familiar with Peter St. Claver because I spoke at their men's program once. And then I'm going to start charging Father Fisher. He's shopping me all over the place. And then I spoke at their King program, and you can see the diversity there. Not only diversity in reference to ethnicity, but diversity in thought and how people interact with each other there. And every time I go there to speak or do whatever we're doing, I really feel comfortable at that church. And I don't think it's because it's necessarily predominantly African American. I think it's the people that's in there, regardless what their ethnicity is. That's probably the biggest piece right there.
Yeah. Just one final comment on the way the journey we have to go. In terms of like holding our church accountable, I guess I'd say I am forever every year blown away by blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby Jesus. And I love the opportunity to see a bunch of other manger scenes, and sometimes like a little art display that where the particular country will have Jesus and Mary and Joseph of the skin color of the people of the culture. So anyways, you had another question, Tim?
No, well, the other question was more around if we could have a discussion group, maybe a discussion group to have a conversation. I'm presuming on these issues, and it took me back. I tried to get Meg Campos on. I know we had a group.
It's called Be the Bridge.
Yeah,
and that's still going on. It meets monthly. on virtual, and Meg coordinates it. So whoever the asker of that question might be. You could get in touch with Meg or with Deacon Tim or myself, and we can put you in touch with Meg. And
I'll respond. I'll give her Meg's contact information on Facebook, so we can do that.
Well, Dr. Cleveland, I'm thinking of what it must have been like for Dr. King and his family. He had several small children and a young wife, and he was doing all this in his 20s and 30s. What was it like for them, for all of them, as he had instances after instance of being arrested or put in jail, bombings of his home. He's been stabbed and punched. How did he and his family cope with all this?
I would think probably the physical part was pretty tough on him, as you mentioned, the beatings, and he's been stabbed and things like that. And, and so a lot of those things heal, but the emotional, psychological damage, particularly on his wife, because many times he was gone for long periods of time, like you said, in jail or marches, things like that. I think many his children were, fairly young, but you can only imagine the burden that his wife was carrying, where she's trying to take care of her children at the same time, getting death threats through the phones and things like that. And a lot of times he was gone, so she had to handle that herself. So I can't say that all that didn't bother him, but I'm just thinking about what she had to go through and experience with her and her children, and at the same time knowing that his life was in danger also. So that took a lot of mental toughness to go through that. But I believe that I think because of his beliefs, that kind of got him through in his faith, and that probably got him through most of that, and his wife through their faith, it got him through that. But it had to be trying and things of that nature. And I'm sure he's thinking to himself, even when they asked him to be the leader of this movement, civil rights movement, I'm sure he's kind of hesitant himself. But I don't know if he'd have done it maybe if he wasn't a clergy, because you got to have faith, right? And sometimes faith is important. You just got to take that leap, right? And when you take that leap of faith, either one or two things is going to happen. Either God's going to catch you, or he's going to teach you how to fly, right? And so he took that leap of faith. But I think his faith and then a minister probably helped him get through that, and his wife's faith, and not only faith in God, but faith in him, got her through that. And like I said, their children were fairly young, but they were starting getting old and starting asking questions. And then you got to feel that, right now, my kids are in college, and they're in college, all the stuff that's going on right now, and I still have to feel those questions, even though they have some degree what's going on. But so you can imagine if they're 18, 19 with questions, and you can explain a little bit to them, but imagine you have 6 and 7-year-olds, and people are calling your house with death threats and things of that nature. So it took a toll on them, I'm sure. People probably didn't see that on the outside, but it probably took a heavy toll on both of them and their marriage and their family.
Yeah. Now, Coretta I know they met at Boston University, and he was studying theology there. What was her field of study?
I'm not quite sure.
She wasn't like in the seminary or so.
No, she wasn't in that. I'm not quite sure what her discipline was in, but very bright and intelligent, but I'm not quite sure what her studies were.
And again, they were probably in minority, drastically in the midst of the college experience here.
Especially in the Northeast during that time, definitely.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that people forget about Dr. King was it wasn't only about racial justice, but it's about social justice. And he really pushed for issues around classism also. And the poor and things like that. Because so you think about that, they used to think about he was strictly only about African Americans, but he also pushed for justice for everyone, but particularly the poor. Also, and he was about equity before people started talking about equity. I know you said you all in Bill that you all talk about equity quite a bit, right? Particularly when it comes to schools and things of that nature. And he was about that. And I try to explain to people about equity, and so they can understand people are coming from different places. So, Father Prabal, you're over here, and Deacon Tim, you're over here, and I'm over here, and we're situated differently. And I'd give you an example about equity for your audience today, and why it's so important, whether it's education, economics, or whatever it is. So we're going through a storm right now in 2021, and imagine we're in the ocean and we're going through the storm, and the storm is made up of the pandemic, social injustices, and economic strain. That's the storm we're all in. But while we're in the storm in the ocean, as I said before, we're all situated differently. Deacon Tim, he may be in an ocean liner out in the storm. So he's feeling the storm, But Father Praver, you are in a large yacht, so it's smaller than the ocean liner, but it's still for you. But you're feeling the storm more than he is. I'm in a traditional boat, so I'm feeling the storm worse than you all are. And then someone else is in a lifeboat, and someone else is on a life raft, and somebody else is on a life preserver in this storm. And so depending on where you are and situated differently, you see things that's taking place in the United States in a very different way. And so we try to address issues around poverty, racial injustice, sexism, racism, all those things. Everyone's situated differently and they have different perspectives. And you can't use a universal strategy to address everyone's situation. But some people think when it's equity, you're taking away from someone else. And that's what a lot of this is about right now, that people feel like they're losing something, right? And that's what he was about, trying to help people understand about fairness, just, and equity. And people struggle with that. They struggle with it then, and they're struggling with it now. I guess, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
Well, I think a lot of people, yeah, it's like we don't want to lose what we've got because we feel like we're so entitled to it. And the bottom line is, let's ask the question of, well, what's enough to live a good life that'll also help others to live a good life? I think that's kind of some of what you're saying.
Exactly.
Could you say a little bit as we go back, to that history and, just some of the giants, and the ordinary people who were the giants. We speak of the people who were even were killed, in the sit-ins or the freedom riders. Many grassroots people from all different races were involved in that, basically that campaign to just have those demonstrations, those sit-ins that, and they would come in on the bus in a sense as freedom riders. They would come in and they would participate in the sit-in to change things.
Yeah, so you had a lot of, as you know, a lot of college students who would come from the Midwest and the North, from all backgrounds, supporting the movement, and not only just marching, but organizing and providing resources and things of that nature. And also by coming down there, putting their lives at risk also. And so they were critical though in the movement. And it was a number of different people, but we tend to hear, about Adam Clayton Powell, Ralph Abernathy, folks like that, Bayard Rustin. Well, Bayard Rustin was a major civil rights leader. He was out of Chicago. As a matter of fact, he was supposed to really speak at the March on Washington. And we're talking about equal rights. So the reason why he was now on the forefront of the March on Washington, even though he's behind the scenes help planning and things like that, because he was an openly gay African-American male. And so even though he was a major strategist in the civil rights movement, and he also helped strategize the March on Washington, things like that, he was not allowed to be out there in the forefront during the march, things like that, because of his sexual orientation, which, I find interesting that you're going to do a march on justice. And then that's one of the reasons why you can't, that particular person was not out front because of his sexual orientation. So there's a lot of inter issues going on with that also. Yeah. But there was to your point, there's a lot of people that were behind the scenes, a lot of college students. And that kind of reminded me of this summer that you did have a lot of college students from a variety of different groups and ethnicities protesting around police brutality. And I find it interesting that people cannot make the distinction between supporting the police and questioning police brutality. It's like, I'm an educator. So if we have 40,000 teachers in the state of Kentucky, and there's one teacher who has low expectations for students, do not treat them right, and we hold that teacher accountable. That don't mean we hate the other 39,000 teachers in the state of Kentucky. But if you say you're against police brutality, that means you're against the police, which makes no sense whatsoever. But I think a lot of times that is done because you don't want to deal with the issue above. So if you say Black Lives Matter, people say all lives matter. Well, we know that. That's just common sense. Or Blue Lives Matter. So when you say that, you don't have to talk about why people are saying Black Lives Matter. So that's a distraction from that. We all know that all lives matter. We all know that we should support the police. There's no question about that. But that's a distraction used not to deal with the injustices, whether it's police brutality, school systems, whatever it is, but it's hard to make that understandable. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? I don't know if y'all had those conversations.
I was just thinking about I was driving through, I see, people with signs Black Lives Matter, and then another yard there's I respect and support the police. And I'm thinking, those signs are not mutually exclusive. Like,
you can have all those signs in your yard, actually.
In there, for both of these, and realize there's always a balance, and sometimes we have to put emphasis in certain areas because we know there's problems in those areas. And as you say, one teacher, holding a teacher or a set of teachers accountable is not, let's throw all the teachers out, right? It's like,
and Deacon Tim, this example I use all the time to try to make it make sense. And I ask people, I said, is high blood pressure deadly? And they're like, yes. I said, is heart attacks deadly? Yes. Is diabetes, deadly? Yes. Is cancer deadly? Yes. I said, they all are. But I said, what is the focus? What's the health focus right now in the United States? COVID-19. So we know all those things can kill you. But right now, our focus is on the pandemic. So it don't mean those other diseases are not important or won't kill you. It's just this particular disease is killing more people at a rapid pace right now. So it's the same thing as you just said. It's not saying all these other people and all these groups are not important. It just means that this particular group of people are suffering at this particular time. If that makes sense, I'll try to use a number of different analogies to try to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Sure. And, again, the analogy that's very personal, of course, would be the priest abuse crisis. And, for all priests to be painted as abusers is a mistake and not fair, of course, but yet to be held accountable for training and preventing, that is, certainly the challenge. Let me shift gears a little bit towards the end of his career, and again, he had this sense, it seemed like a spiritual sense that something was going to happen. I think it's related to I've been to the mountain top, it was almost in a sense of that he had a premonition. How accurate is that as people have known him so well, much better than I have?
I think that I still go back, it calls back to his faith.
Yeah.
And been a minister and things of that nature. And he's preaching these kinds of things all the time, that at some point in time, we all gonna have our fate. And between the real threats that he received every single day, and the fact of his beliefs, that I think he knew that his time was coming. He may not knew exactly when. So I think he had a premonition. So I think also that helped him speak really freely, that he was not afraid to die. He knew his time was coming. I don't think he thought it was going to happen at, 39 years of age, or I think it was at 39 when he died.
That is so young, but yeah, that's right.
No, and that's very young to think that way. I could never be at that level, to be so ready and even still be willing that every time you walk out the door, you're going to speak your truth to power, knowing that at any time that you could die. So I think that the reason why he said that, partly because, like I said, the threats, but also partly because of his faith, and he was okay with that. And you had to be okay with that to say that, and that's why he and Gandhi and a few other people are just at another level than most people. They just, I know I'm not there yet. I'm still in the construction, you know.
Yep.
So yeah, I
I'm
think
looking forward to tomorrow.
that.
You say a little bit about, he was, the presidents basically saw the importance of moving towards, civil rights legislation. Kennedy and then Lyndon Johnson followed through with Kennedy's commitments. But some of that affection for Martin Luther King changed as he opposed the war in Vietnam.
Mhm. Yeah, that's, I think that's when the his demise started taking place, because that was politically internationally and how people perceive the United States. And so I think as long as he stayed down south and talking about bus boycotts and civil rights for African Americans and desegregation, things like that, that was kind of localized. And I think two things happened when he started moving towards, as I said, the book called The Parallels of Black Men. When he started moving towards a focus similar to Malcolm X moving towards King's kind of focus, they see him as more of a radical, because he moved out of that little realm of just a civil rights desegregation thing. And then when he protested the Vietnam War, that was international. And, and Dr. King was international. People knew him, but he wasn't speaking really collectively about the United States necessarily all the time about civil rights, particularly down south. So I think when they felt like he was putting them in a different light through the eyes of others internationally, I think that was problematic for him and those in power. Because it spiraled really fast that once he starts mentioning and challenging the Vietnam War. You think about it, he was pretty much received for the most part in the North during the civil rights movement, things like that. But once he starts talking about issues that they felt like put the United States in a different light, a negative light, then those kind of relationships kind of soured.
He was assassinated in 68 at age 39. How do what was the immediate response nationally, or some of the most poignant responses to his assassination?
I think for most African Americans and some white people, shocked and in disbelief. Some people down south was good riddance, but I think most of the country was in shock and disbelief. Actually, African Americans, particularly in the North, was more anger as you saw the riots and things of that nature. So I think it depends on where you were situated, how his work impacted you in different parts of the country. But most African Americans saw him as a hero and someone that was about ensuring justice for them. So that angered a lot of people. Unfortunately, when people riot and protest, it's usually in their locale. So, their neighborhoods, their stores and things like that were being burnt and things of that nature. I told somebody yesterday, you don't catch the bus to go riot, right? You just, when you're upset, you're upset. And he once said that riots and protests is the voice of the unheard. And so I think people just think they lost something and lost some momentum, something to believe in when he was assassinated. And I don't know if you've ever been there before, but the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis.
I've been there. I've been to Birmingham, but not there.
Yeah. Well, the one in Memphis has, the whole replication of the Lorraine Motel. It is Lorraine Motel. They just turned it into a museum, and it still has a cigarette sitting there that he was smoking. his bed unmade, what was out on the balcony when him and Abernathy and Jesse Jackson were all out there talking. The room is exactly the same. When you walk in there, it's just this eerie feeling like he's there. And then people there are talking about the responses, like you asked, the responses, the curators telling you about the responses the city of Memphis had and other predominantly African-American cities about the anger and disbelief and things like that when he died. And that's why I go all the way back to your one of your initial questions about how he'll be celebrated. And, that kind of bothers me sometimes that we do this stuff on that one day and then we go back to business as usual on that Tuesday. And I don't think that's really celebrating and honoring the things that he did for the entire country, just not for Black people.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, just with my own recollection, just a little story. I've participated, in the breakfast and the march, and that's all been great. And there was one year, maybe a few years back, I saw in the newspaper that there was going to be an observance of and a service in response to him at the, I guess at the county sanitation department at their office building. So, I got all dressed up in my, clerical stuff and figured, well, shoot, I think I'll go to that. And, lo and behold, it was a potluck supper that all kinds of the workers were having. Turned out that, I didn't know anybody, nobody knew me, and just kind of blended in a fun way and, enjoyable way. And then the person that they had lined up to do the prayer didn't make it. So it was pretty obvious I was a minister. So there I was.
You're it.
Yeah. And so welcoming. And again, it's one of those things that these are the folks that Martin Luther King was working for, that he's putting his life on the line for, that they would be respected. And, and again, I mean, it's not a big deal, but, I have just a respect for, everybody out there doing their work, that needs to be done to, and we've seen what happens when there's strikes or when, even with holidays, when things aren't picked up. And it's not an easy job, and it's sometimes a dangerous job, but, it's just part of life. So I was, when it's all said and done, I was as honored to be there, probably more honored than being part of a cast of thousands with the breakfast and the lunch and the march and everything. So anyway, just a little personal thing. If somebody would be saying, what do I need to know as a white person in suburbia about Dr. Martin Luther King? What's the most important lesson to take away, and maybe even a recommendation? I know you mentioned the letters from the Birmingham jail, and something to take any of us to the next step.
I think that he was about. I think just remember this: he was about moral leadership, and since in this space, a church and a congregation, I think that would be really important about moral leadership. Courageous leadership is important. But one thing that, he really talks about quite a bit is, silence is consent. So there's a number of ways that you can speak out, support, assist. You don't have to put your job on the line and things of that nature, but there's a number of things, because a lot of people have a lot of influence in the community and in the city of Lexington. And if people see you idly sit by and watch injustice take place, then they feel like it's okay for them to do the same. And so one of the things he talks about is silence is consent. And so whether it's about civil rights, Black Lives Matter, classism, whatever, injustices are injustices. So it doesn't matter what it is about, but it's about you taking a stand against those things, those injustices. And that's what he wants people to do. And I don't know I think part of the issue is just people not knowing sometimes, and then the fear of how they'll be perceived. But moral leadership and courageous leadership and speaking up will make a major difference. If you really want to honor him and celebrate his work and honor his word, in stepping up and speaking up when you see injustices take place in the best way you can do it, in your way. That don't necessarily mean you have to be out in the streets. That doesn't necessarily mean you can do it a number of ways. It could be something as simple as, discussing it through the lens of religion at Sunday school, and talking to a group of students or college students or in your men's group at church, whatever it is. You don't always have to be in the streets to do that. Matter of fact, I would rather you just talk to people closely to you and teach them. So those kinds of things, and a couple of books. One is Why We Can't Wait, and that's by Dr. King. That's a really good book. And the other one is Parting the Waters by Taylor Branch. So Why We Can't Wait, it's a really good book. And then Parting the Waters by Taylor Branch.
All righty. We're pretty much at the end of our time. I will say, Dr. Cleveland, it'd be great to just, the three of us debrief. We'll take about 2-3 minutes for that after the program, rather than just sign off automatically. And it's been great to have you with us today. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and your spirit with us. And, and again, we want a great day on Monday, but like you say, it'd be the springboard to 364 more days of working for justice and, respecting everybody.
That's all right. Well, I appreciate you all inviting me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Tim, can you flash up what we got next week?
There you go.
So next week, Jason Hall, the Executive Director of the Catholic Conference of Kentucky. It represents all 4 dioceses of our state, and it's located in Frankfort. It's you might say among other things, the official advocacy and lobbying arm of the Catholic Church within our state. So we'll be talking about what's going on with the General Assembly this time around. Hopefully, we'll be talking about the good day that we had on Wednesday, and but also what life is like in Frankfurt these days, but more than anything, we'll be looking at some of the issues that the Assembly will be addressing. So, hope you can join us next week, and thanks to everybody. Have a great day, and keep in mind our prayers and our openness to God's Spirit is going to be so helpful for all of us as we move forward. So God bless you all. Thanks for being with us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.